Welcome everybody to the Great Witness, Kevin the Great Witness show. Adventure series is, and we're here with Kevin Smith from the UK, who'll be sharing his experiences with us, and we'll be commenting on them and asking questions. Tim is here, I'm Dean Val, and we'll give it over to Kevin.
This real side experience would open up in a sort of a medieval council room. It wasn't a very spacious area, was rather dimly lit, but had a sort of comforting, homely feel about it. The layout and decor very much like you'd expect to see in the Middle Ages, and indeed this courtroom was part of a castle. The castle seemed to be underground. Small openings that served as windows were placed high in the walls that allowed light to enter from the world above, as though the castle were only partially beneath the ground. And perhaps then this room was among those in the uppermost sections of this castle. I referred to it as a council area, as the room had 3 thrones, and this is where royal business was conducted. The 3 thrones were placed against one wall. The central throne was the largest, and sat on that throne was an individual who presented as though the king of this castle. For some reason, the reference provided to my personal self through the real awareness, the impression I had was that this king was Richard III. Despite the appearance of the king, dressed in the fine robes you'd expect for such a person, and the design of the attire in keeping with the era and his historical identity, I knew this individual was Duane. Although Duane was not assuming his physical level body form. Again, the real awareness can discern the identities of all individuals, regardless of the outer forms they assume on the real side. Real guides, Duane, and individuals who have the recognition and real standing with the isness exude a kind of unmistakable sense about them that only such an individual who stands in recognition of the true reality and their real awareness can project. Such an isness standing presence would be absent from any individual who is creationally and personal self immersed only, and although it can be present in degrees with the extent to which an individual is becoming more aware, there is a tremendous difference between encountering a real guide or Duane and an individual who is on their process of awareness but is not there yet. Also, as the reptilians and dark forces are master shapeshifters, as they can mimic the guides and Duane, and as they can utilize clones and holograms, that they may also look identical to the genuine individuals. The personal self alone would be unable to determine the genuine guides from the dark force fakes, unless the reptilians attempting such a form assumption and deception make themselves apparent through behaviours uncharacteristic of a guide, as a guide's every action makes sense with and supports the whole of life and awareness. As such, the personal self can easily be tricked and deceived. Things are seldomly what they appear to be in creation, and especially on the real side. With all the distortion, the technology, and cyberspace overlapping realities that are obscuring creation as it actually is. And so, we must lean to the real awareness, aside from a personal self, that can only perceive what is presented on the surface. A real awareness that can determine intent through the overview it has of everything creationally based, as the real awareness we all are, is through everything that has been created, through all the body forms, that the ideas generated through them effect into simulated creation. The personal self can see but pieces, according to what vehicle of the 5 bodies it's viewing through, but the real awareness is not resigned to any perception-limiting vehicle, and so all thoughts, emotions, agendas, ideas, and intents are laid bare before it. And the real awareness will make the personal self aware of deception, as it will add certain additional features to what we are experiencing that makes it apparent we are being deceived. We may see a dark force reptilian disguising itself as a guide or someone we know, but the replication will appear distorted or unfinished. And as I said, the real awareness will know an individual's intent, will know also the individual that is behind any guise they decide to assume, and over time the personal self begins to build a kind of catalogue of the subtle differences between individuals, the guides and Duane, etc., as every being is unique, and the variations that make each being so are discernible by the real awareness. It's very often that Duane will present in this manner as a king, or on other occasions as an admiral of the seas, for example, as really what is being represented is the awareness and recognition of the individuals in a form that the personal self can readily relate to, and that makes the individual's identity more apparent even to a personal self that lacks real awareness discernment, or that for whatever reason we are not standing as fully into the real awareness, where everything is rather more apparent, and so must rely on the personal self's surface evaluations only, and a king or an admiral would of course denote a position of great awareness therefore, as a relatable creational reference, and these specifics are unique to each individual's experience and tailored to each individual's personal selves' current lifetime references. Maybe, as an example, for an individual who has no references regarding the military or royalty of kings or admirals that, say, was a part of a tribe in a remote area, for such an individual I can imagine Duane presenting as a tribal chieftain to represent the great awareness that he is. Anyway, 2 other individuals sat either side of Duane, occupying the other thrones, evidently his most entrusted associates, or maybe they were guides, and this would make sense, as you would naturally have the king's advisors sat in such close proximity during any council room discussions, and who else would have Duane's ear other than the real guides, as they work with him on the real side to bring about this creational wake-up. 2 further individuals now would enter this room and have an audience with Duane. There were negotiations of some kind or other. The details were lost to my personal self, but the impressions I had were regarding the future of the planet Earth, the distribution and management of resources, and the orientation more toward natural environment supporting systems as opposed to the current dark force systems that are destroying and polluting the planet. The wordage and terms expressed were somewhat out of place in this medieval setting. All I remember is how they were more modern expressions and not the sort of middle-age words you'd expect. As of course, this entire setting was just for effect, and representing something other than it visually and literally appeared to be. These 2 characters looked very shifty to me. The phrase of, "You wouldn't trust them to tell you the time in a clock shop" occurred. With the negotiations completed, they would depart from the chamber, exiting the castle, ascending upward back to the surface again. Duane would remark during the real side experience also how he considered them not entirely trustworthy, and that this negotiation was a tentative at best. It suggested that Duane was making negotiations with representatives of the dark forces, individuals that perhaps on the real side were inclined toward deciding to step up and assist Duane in rectifying the dismal situation of a planet spiraling toward destruction. For many of the dark forces are stepping up also, reptilians and alien species that have been a part of the perpetuation and maintenance of the creational control for eons, through the agreements of the masses they have secured. But many of these dark force characters recognize now how the simulator is in peril, and they will be caught up in the effects also, and this is rather the incentive for them to help offset a simulator that's situation is based on agreement. So change the agreements and the consciousness, and you change the simulated overall experience that effects from it, and become more aware, and you step out of personal self-consciousness that, as all personal selves are comprising of restricting ideas and agreements that effect a simulator into its spiraling demise. And naturally, the dark force characters can never be fully trusted. they had, after all, been intergalactic warmongers, tyrants and controllers for the longest time, and that is generally their inclination. But every individual is given a chance. The opportunity for recognizing the ears is available to all dark force characters and the agreeable slave masses alike, as we are all this real awareness. That's real purpose, is to recognize the isness that it is. But it is all about agreement, decision, and intent, and you're dealing with the free will of these aliens and dark force characters that have very little, if any, awareness, so there are no guarantees. But at least the dark forces are listening, and are prepared to hear what Duane had to say in regards to the future of the Earth and how it is managed. The next scene was still in an underground setting, though not so much looking like a medieval castle, but still rather a basic and rudimentary place, almost like a bunker of a kind. I was there among many others, and all seemed to be of the standing real, becoming more aware persuasion. I didn't recognize anybody. They all seemed unfamiliar to my personal self, but all very keen, and you had a strong sense of their sincerity and real intent. At one point, a new individual was introduced to the people here. She was to assume a role vacated by another woman who had recently walked away from her position. She seemed very nervous and tentative, and rather uncertain as to where to go and her duties, to the extent that she began to cry. But then 2 other women came to her assistance, filled her in as to her function, providing the support you see exhibited between those who recognize each other being to being, and showed her to her quarters. She was to occupy a room positioned in the uppermost part of this bunker. Again, this was showing how people will come and go, how individuals will step back into a personal self that they deem more important, and that comes first before the whole of life and their real awareness. Everybody assumes positions and earns their way according to the manner by which they decide. There are endless options, opportunities, and room for everybody to go about their process in a way of their choosing, as long as they operate from a position of sincerity and share and promote the ears and the guides without distortion or hidden agendas. And as people do step back and forfeit their opportunity to supersede creation, so their position can be available to be filled by others. As Claudie said herself, prior to her stepping back, there would be other seers that would be coming through, as the real guides always find the individuals willing and agreeable to assist Duane in the capacity that best supports life, awareness, and the great creational wake-up. And indeed, not long thereafter, when Sandy and Claudie did step back, so did the Farseers emerge onto the scene, with Duane seeing their imminent arrival firstly on the real side, as he would encounter their group, and determine that they had a great focus to be seers before making their presence known on the physical. A little later on, in this real side experience, everybody in this bunker were gathered in a large open section, like a meeting hall. Duane would enter this scene with 3 books to present to 3 individuals. The recipients would be those who had excelled best in regards to their heart, their focus, and sincerity to recognize the ears, and he distributed the books accordingly, rather a token of recognition for the 3 individuals, but really a distinction the 3 had decided for themselves, as it is up to everyone to go through the process of awareness, and the extent to which people get involved and fully commit dictates the extent of their awareness and the pace they become so, through their risk-taking and promotion of the ears. I had the impression they were sort of new books of a kind, full of awareness-bolstering insights, almost in keeping with the notion of everything equaling itself. Awareness represented by these books, earned in equal measure to that which an individual decides to share, do, stand real, and be in support of the true reality, etc. Right at the end of this real side experience, I would find myself in this bunker still, but alone, and a forbidding darkness would suddenly sweep into the scene and direct itself toward me. I had the impression that this darkness preceded an individual of tremendous creational power and capability, and this wave of darkness represented this extreme rage. The impression of the individual was a large character dressed entirely in black, his head also concealed in a black helmet through which no features could be discerned. I recognized this individual in that I had encountered him once before, and that was when I had sung the NUUU song for the first time prior to sleep. For as I began to sing this NUUU song for the first time, around November of 2017, this same individual, dressed exactly as he was in this experience, manifested in my room, and just stood there looking at me. He said not a word, just regarded me for a time before vanishing from sight. I would suggest this was the Kalorm god, and on sharing this experience, Duane would agree that this was very likely the case, as the Kalorm god, like all the minions of his controlling systems throughout creation, have a tendency of checking in on someone singing the NUUU song for the first time, as this would present as defiance of the Kalorm's control, and so he or his minions are inclined to present themselves in an attempt to intimidate the personal self. And here he was again, evidently not very pleased at me bearing witness to Duane on the real side, and that which Duane is involved with, that benefits all, and especially as my intention, as it always is, that having witnessed the real side experiences, is to record and share them, that others can benefit awareness-wise. The dark forces certainly do not relish the prospect of losing any of their slaves, who through their agreements bolster and maintain the controlling positions the dark forces and the Calorm have established for themselves. So anyone trying to supersede creation, to stand as the beings of real light they are, in the real universes of the ears, and that encourage others to do likewise, through the promoting and sharing of Duane's real references that pertain to the ears, and the means by which this process of awareness can be so, can expect such dark force intimidation and confrontation tactics, and a visit from the Calorm himself. His black flood of rage was quite a frightful thing for my personal self, but there seemed to be a special lamp close at hand, and as I scrambled to turn it on, the glorious light it produced swept away this darkness, and its owner, who would surely be entering the scene not far behind, would never materialize. This lamp represented the true light of the real awareness, of the isness that the real awareness is a part of, and that the standing in the true reality of what we really are is aside and beyond any imposition, intimidation, attacks, or authorities, imposition that can only be experienced in cause and effect creation, and through agreement at that, and that with the real awareness, the real intent, we can face everything in creation without being concerned as to the effects. Automatic protection is assured, as we stand real and fully with the real awareness that we really are, switching on the lamp, the true light of the is, which is the real awareness, sweeps away and displaces even the most terrible of creational darknesses. Duane the Great Writer responded to this real side experience at the time of the sharing of it, and I quote, "With me, as the king, etc., it's a metaphor. This is just how the world is. It doesn't mean I am the ruler or anything, just something to identify with, and right and left of me on the thrones would be Paul and ReBisar. ReBisar is first, Paul is second, and I'm number 3. This is why I was represented as Richard III. In your experience, these were negotiations with Enki and Enlil. I made the deal with them. They were to head everything with the ships over the earth, but they have attitudes and are rather baby-brained. But they can come up to par, and they see what's going on here. Then again, these aliens are pirates, and it's all about seeing who has the courage to step up and do something real. Some of the aliens just wanted to rape the planet because it was vulnerable, so we could hear them speaking about this in outer space, as they communicate telepathically, etc. So we put them in the phantom zone with the Queen, etc., with all those that had that idea, as they're not seeing the big picture. The bigger picture is that the real guides will take care of them. No more reincarnation or unconsciousness. But if they want to be idiots and play with continuous games of devastation, well then they're going to have to deal with it. So that's the education. The castle is appropriate, because even though we have technology today, even as we're told we're evolving and progressing, it's not so. These are like medieval times. Things are more evil than ever. You look at the indigenous people, the birds and the trees. They're not evil. They don't have plans. They don't do devious things. We do have a technology. We deal with it. But there's a position where we will get beyond this and the monetary system, etc. We're not just a gang of people doing something that sounds good, rebellion, etc. That's not the idea. So we're invited here, invited to participate and play a part in it. It's a privilege, but if you blow it, then you blow it, and you will have a lot more lifetimes to go, and many people have come and gone. We've all come here to wake up. I created the new presentation for everybody. It's not about me. It's about everybody. We're all free beings of real light. The new presentation provides references to where people can learn to recognize how to wake up and recognize this reality and the real universes, more so than just the layers of creation. And there are many seemingly endless dimensions in creation, and now with the technology they're creating cyber dimensions, etc. I suggest to see the movie Tron, Lawnmower Man, Brainstorm, Starburst, etc. Movies are documentaries. And Blind Spot on Netflix as another example. Netflix are really bought off by the cabal. They're just telling and showing everybody what's going on blatantly. I see the things people go through in these series. We're all here to do this, to benefit everybody. I'd say the girl that left in your experience, who vacated her opportunity and position, was Kelsey, and another taking her place. It's up to Kelsey to struggle back, and she has to decide. It's not about hoping and praying. It's about deciding.
I'm looking at that part about the personal self catching on. It takes a while for the personal self, this created self that we've created for ourselves, to get a hang of how this works, because of the huge indoctrination that we've gone through lifetimes, and finally coming to the point where we can recognize something that is real instead of the distortions. But it's got the real awareness and the personal self have to make some kind of a bond agreement or some kind of a relationship there to make it happen, because we do need the personal self while we're here, but it needs to be aligned. All the five bodies need to be aligned with the intent to wake up, and the intent and the decision to see something more. So it's a heck of a challenge to help people, help ourselves and help others to see this relationship, how to manage the personal self, because it's got a life of its own. It, it almost like wants to be in creation and stay in creation, has no interest or relationship to the real universes other than what the real awareness is able to bring through for it to, because it can't relate. So it has to be through hints, intuition, demonstrations, something to kick in the awareness for it to decide to go that route, to wake up, to want to see more. Otherwise, it's just satisfied here. I know I was just satisfied with Ekankar. I would have just kept going and going and going, but something when I heard first Duane talk, it just something there that was different. It was something more. I was curious. There was something I wanted to investigate, and it was just unique. It was pure. It was unique in itself. But most people are in their comfort zone and they want to stay there, and that's fine. But things aren't getting better, so their comfort zone is going to be uncomfortable in the future, not now.
When I hearing the experience, the wonderful experience of Kevin, dear Kevin, I imagine that this experience could be help to share with new seers too, because in such situation, sincere people could find the many things behind this and could help others really didn't know about the NUUU, and it could be better for starting the NUUU presentation for people with a with a hard mind to face with this experience, real experience.
Yes, well, we'll send you this too. We'll send you this recording.
Thank you so much.
What were the 3 books that were given to, who was it that they were given to in your experience? Duane gave 3 books to somebody.
I had no impression at the time as to who these individuals were. I would imagine were I to have had the experience more recently, I probably would have had more of an impression of them, but back at the time, I wouldn't. And I was actually pondering that myself, for sometimes when I read my experiences, I really get absorbed in them, and it's almost like I'm back there again. So sometimes as I'm reading the experiences, I get other insights and real awareness impressions as I go, and I go, oh, that's interesting. Sometimes I write a little note down there to remind myself of it, but no, I had no impression as to who they were. So
that was still in the castle, right? He was off his throne. He was walking around, Duane, or what?
Yeah, it was an overall structure. It seemed to be connected to the castle. The scene switched, so I didn't see the transition from the castle scene to the bunker, but it all seemed to be interconnected. And yeah. And also you have to remember this experience was about a year or so ago, and so what was decided back then by all the relevant individuals involved may not necessarily be the same now, because as Duane says, people are coming and going all the time, and so who knows as to how many people in that experience are still here now, or if indeed that was maybe a future view which now represents the people coming into this experience now. And like Duane said, I think the other day, he has a strong impression, or has seen on the real side, that Kelsey is getting ready to return now as well, whereas back then she was still very much deciding to stay away from the process of awareness. But by increments and degrees, I think she's getting set to return.
Well, she came to Ava, had the experience that she wanted to come back. Yeah. Not 5 days ago or so, 6 days ago. Yeah, Ava had that experience, which was different than the previous experiences where she was kind of like stand backish. So we'll see. She will have much to tell if she comes back, what she's gone through. It's like this fire starter that we just saw. That girl that Charlie went, the experiences she went through there. Let's go on then, Kevin. Thank you.
This real side experience began in my house, on the second floor of it. On the real side, should we find ourselves in our physical level houses, the recreation of them will represent the personal self. The personal self, comprising of all the created consciousness, tapline, agreement, and attachment ideas that it does, will require a greatly expanded version of our houses, however, to accommodate what are millions of lifetimes of accumulated taplines that have been gathering and compounding ever since our real awareness originally constructed its first personal self body vehicle and placed it in the simulator. The first floor of the personal self house is the personal creational side. The second floor, more the unseen parts of the multi-dimensional personal self, through the life levels beyond the physical, from astral to etheric. Should we be having real side experiences on the first floor, these represent personal self agreements and activities that we are fully conscious of, and depending on who or what we might find there, reveals to us the agreements we are making and with whom. A good verification of maintained emotional attachments then, as only those we are attached to or in agreement with can enter our personal self experience on the physical, represented on the real side, with them being able to be present on the first floors of our homes. Personally immersed and creationally intended people only will represent agreements and attachments that don't make sense with life and awareness, for unless individuals are on their process of awareness, they maintain a disconnect from their real awareness until such time as their real awareness decides to become more aware, and as such, we will only generally be engaging with their personal selves if we decide to extend agreements to them or attachments. We then will be deciding and agreeing with only the idea of the individual, their personal selves, and like any created idea, we then are deciding to resign ourselves to the effects. When we are engaging with other individuals, being to being, more from a real awareness position, we are operating beyond cause and effect, and shared experience is not so much then dependent on creation for it to be so, as it would from a creational personal self to personal self shared experience. People on their awareness processes would still have their physical level personal selves and creation, and to work and support each other on the physical would require agreement between the personal selves that affects a shared physical level, cause and effect experience. But the difference is, those becoming more aware have the intent and real focus to eventually get beyond the limited creational realms, whereas personal self-immersed people only are choosing to remain in creation, and so, if we wish to retain them in our experience, we must limit ourselves as they are, that the experiences align through the matching causes. So, should we encounter one-dimensional and personal self-intended people on the first floor of our houses, these really represent tap-lining attachments that we need address and preferably release. But should we have real guides, Duane, or other individuals on their awareness processes present on the first floor, as their intent aligns with ours, as we will share with them the same real purpose for is recognition, this would be more favourable and a welcome sight, as agreement with such individuals will not be self-limiting, or that we would be limiting to them, and indeed we would also have verification that our personal self is in agreement with the guides, by virtue of them being able to enter our personal self-houses on the real side, as nothing or nobody can feature in our experience on the physical or the real side unless we extend to them free will permission. As such, we could conceivably just sit in our houses without anybody being able to enter, were it not for the subconscious agreements and attachments we have that facilitate entry to the numerous individuals, creatures and beings we have forged attachments and agreements with over the millions of simulated lives we have lived, including the personal selves programmed subconscious agreements to their controllers, which allow them to march into our real side houses, into our experience, in other words, at any time of their choosing, and based on the nature of agreement, that is, to their power over us, they can rather than do as they please within the agreement parameters we have set for them, until such a time as we stand real in our real awareness, and no longer are the effects of the personal selves conscious construction, or at least we are conscious of the effects, as we eventually face the entirety of the personal self, and all its tap-line agreements and attachments are laid bare. Agreement and attachment extends and expresses itself throughout the multi-dimensional levels of our created selves, and so any agreements and attachments we have, be they beneficial agreements awareness-wise and with other awareness-becoming individuals, or detrimental and limiting with personal self-based individuals only, These agreements will play out on all life levels, and the experiences that stem from these agreements on the levels of life beyond the physical, the unseen parts of our created selves and the simulation, these will occur then on the second floor of our personal self recreated homes. And so, as we become more aware, the real guides and life will always show us on the real side what we need be aware of now, what is most beneficial for our awareness process that we need to address, deal with, face, or confront in each moment we are afforded the real side views that we are. And so, agreements and attachments need be addressed, the tap lines released, as it is these ideas that we cling to, that bind us to creation through cause and effect, and to supersede the necessity of the simulations, we need release them all, see them for what they are, just references to recognize the is from the comparisons they provide. And as I said, these agreements and attachments, conscious or subconscious, on the physical first floor of the personal self, or the unseen and second floor of the other parts of the created self, will facilitate the presence of others in our experience. And so, if our subconscious or conscious agreements have allowed ill-intended individuals and creatures into our experience, and the nature of the agreements permits them to attack us, it's rather prudent to be shown this, as all interaction begins on the real side, then eventually filters through to the physical level, not always as a physical level encounter with individuals, but with the effects that them being in our experience on the real side can cause the physical vehicle. For all illnesses begin on the real side, decisions we have made that filter through the vehicles and impact the physical body. Tap lines are attached from the astral through agreements and attachments to the reptilians, and through all the systems and ideas they have created, and this eventually expresses as cancers on the physical. So if agreements and attachments are allowing creatures and beings of ill intent to then access our experience on the unseen levels of life on the real side, and they have the permissions to attack or affect us adversely, we may be oblivious to this, and the physical body compromised. And so, this is what we need be aware of now, and the real guides will show us. And as it is an attack from the unseen levels, so it will play out on the second floor of our personal self recreated houses. For naturally, as we go about our awareness process, as we get stuck in and face the whole of life and creation, we are facing all the effects of our agreements, taking on additional karma through the operating in creation as we do, through the sharing and promoting of the is, and through the bothering of everybody throughout creation, as a consequence of our sharing, we will be opening ourselves up to all manner of attacks, confrontations, and situations. But all is necessary as a process to go through to eventually stand real with the isness that we are. And so, in one of the rooms of the second floor of the personal self recreated house on the real side, there seemed to be some insectoid-like monstrosity. It looked rather like a combination of a scorpion and a wasp, for its body was very scorpion-like with the multiple legs, but its head very much looked like a wasp's, and the final section of its body was arched over its back, boasting a formidable-looking stinger, and pointed in the direction its head was facing. It was about the size of a cat, I would say, and just seemed to be stationary and unmoving. At first I thought it was dead, or perhaps asleep. I would go downstairs and inform another individual who was also present in the house, and he would accompany me upstairs to the room to investigate. My impressions were that this individual was a real guide, or someone with a greater awareness and recognition of the ears than I, and so someone you naturally would seek advice and counsel from. And again, with this individual stationed on the first floor, very much then, the agreement to the guide was represented, and all the way through my real awareness to the personal self. For we do need to have the personal self fully aligned throughout the 5 vehicles of it with the real intent of the real awareness of is recognition, or we rather have a kind of tug of war between the real intent and whatever it is the personal self wants that is presenting as resistance. And very often the guides are working with the real awareness but can't get through to the personal self, which through its choices are blocking the ability of life and the real guides to assist and feature in the real side experiences of the individual, as nothing can penetrate the self-convinced and decided illusions of the personal self if it refuses to see anything beyond them. So you'd have a rather amusing situation of the personal self locked in an impenetrable bubble of illusions on the real side, with the real awareness of the individual and the real guides trying to find a way in. Evidently, at the time of the sharing of this experience, whatever this creature was beyond my ability to deal with. It had been revealed to my awareness, but sometimes the tap lines that allow the presence of such creatures are so convoluted and complex, as many are interwoven throughout millions of lifetimes, we do need assistance from the real guides, who will remove tap lines if again we grant them permission, and if we intend not to re-establish them, or it's rather pointless a tap line to be removed if we just agree to the ideas again that have it reinserted. The real guide leaned close to inspect the insect, which then reared into life and sprung at him. We both retreated back onto the landing, exiting the room, and this individual told me to quickly withdraw into an adjoining room and secure myself there. I would do so, and then a kind of protective, translucent shield slid across in front of me, ensuring I was unreachable by the monster insect. For this other individual was battling and wrestling with it now, and at one point it would sting him. The sting seemed to have a paralyzing effect, and this individual lay prone and unmoving on the floor. This insect glared at me and scuttled back and forth across the landing, unable to reach me through this curious shield of protection, and it was frustrated consequently. I had the impression this individual had erected this shield of safety to protect me, and had taken the hit, the sting, on my behalf, so rather suggesting, as was my impression, that the individual was indeed a real guide, taking on some of my karmic baggage, taking on an effect I would have been facing through my process of awareness, an effect that I wasn't aware enough or capable enough to deal with. For unless we can unravel and reveal and be conscious of all the agreements that make up a particular culmination of an effect experience, and then be able to fully release all the idea aspects of the effect, then we are going to have an adverse experience that may not be very favourable for the personal self. Standing fully in the real awareness would ensure we can experience all effects we must face. But with the tap lines that feed them removed, it would be just like watching a movie. But if we uncover something we haven't fully dismantled, agreement idea-wise, that then will have the corresponding effect, and if the effect takes the form of an attacking creature, we will be more immersed in the experience, and from a personal creational perspective, not from a real awareness objective view, as anything of creation, any idea that still is retained regarding the effect we are facing will draw us from this real awareness standing. As such, these are the moments when the real guides step in, as they always decide to act if it makes sense to do so, and if an individual is sincere on their process, and such a situation occurs, so the guides will stand in protection of us. I slid open the protective, shielding panel. It apparently yielded on command. For anything the guides do, even if it is beneficial for us, we always decide, and I went to inspect the prone individual. The real guides are of course untouchable. They operate fully as real beings of light, and operate and come and go in creation and the real side experiences of others as they so choose. Often when they seem injured or harmed, they are play acting, for what we are seeing of the guides in these experiences is a temporary, created idea of the guides, as everything in creation and on the real side that is visual must be ideas. It must be simulation, including body forms, and not the actual real awareness of the guides. And in this case, as with other similar experiences on the real side, because of the effect we were to face that took the form of a monster, or that facilitated the attack of a creature or individual that was able to encroach on our experience, as we faced and laid bare a particular aspect of the personal self we were to face, because the attacking monster was beyond my ability to deal with, due to the complexity of the idea agreements not fully dealt with that allowed its imposition. So a guide would step into a creation, create an idea of a body form that his awareness operated, like any body vehicle, and stepping into the personal, real side arena would take the hit, take the effect, take the karma that I would have had to deal with. In the experience, my personal self was concerned as to this individual's well-being, but as I said, a real guide is never in any peril, despite the karmic hits they take on our behalf. But the moment I came to his side, the insect attacked again, although it was scuttling around clumsily, as though unable to see, all of a sudden, bumping into things and launching in my general direction, but unable to pinpoint my exact position and sting me also, almost as though it was still present as part of the personal self, but the tap line it represented I no longer was agreeing with in its entirety, as though the tap lines that made this attack so were unravelling and becoming less, which made the effects of this creature's attack less formidable, the creature becoming weaker as the tap lines were being removed. And so it couldn't get at me any longer with such effectiveness. I was becoming indifferent to it. As the tap lines released, so would I automatically stand in my real awareness objectivity of this idea creature, and thus beyond its restricting cause and effect clutches, beyond the paralyzing sting of its restriction. For remaining stuck in creation is very much a paralysis, a locked-in and unchanging state of affairs, based on repetitive routines, limiting attachments and tap lines, and agreement to the rigid restricting programming of the authorities. But then a small black-furred dog would appear on the landing also, pick up the insect creature in its mouth, and try to carry it toward me, to facilitate the insect's ability to sting me. I had to keep leaping out of the way as the dog scurried at me. The insect and its poised stinger held loosely but securely enough between its jaws. In the end, I grabbed the dog by the back of the neck, careful to not touch the insect. The dog squealed, and I squashed the insect as it fell from the dog's jaws. So this dog was very much trying to get me to agree again with whatever tap lines this insect represented, or whatever tap lines had facilitated its attack, tap lines I had just released. The dog could represent something or someone trying to always seek that I maintain this tap line or tap lines in general. So a representation of the dark forces that naturally want all tap line agreements retained, that they can keep everyone in creation as their agreeable slaves. And the fact that the form chosen was that of man's best friend, a little black-furred dog, well, this represents the general means by which the controllers ploy people to agree with their distortion. Package it to look appealing and beneficial on the surface, but what it represents is a distorted and restricting idea, that agreement to which is destroying the planet effectively and bringing the simulator to its demise ultimately, as all agreements to a restriction through the consciousness that affects the simulator will cause it to deteriorate. I could see the deadly, stinging insect clamped in the dog's jaws, behind the marketing surface ploy of the harmless-looking dog, and in this case, the specific colour of the dog, being black, represented the unconsciousness that would be perpetuated, and even made more so, by continued agreement to restriction and control. Duane the Great Writer responded to this experience at the time of the sharing of it, and I quote, "This is how it is. This was an experience where you get these views. You're being protected. Someone else comes in and takes the hit, and I'm sure it was a real guide doing that, and it was okay. I remember an experience with Yorbal Sakabi. He's the big guy. He's been around a lot longer than ReBisar. It was in an out-of-space scene on the moon, or somewhere like that. There were two giant doors, and from the sky was the Kalorm god, about to launch a lightning bolt at me. The doors were open. Then Yorbal closed the doors. The lightning bolt went behind the doors that Yorbal had sealed, and where he now stood on the other side of. He opened the doors shortly after, and had a big gash on his forehead, and he has taken hits for me before. Claudie and Sandy, who were still with the new presentation at the time, saw the alien that gave me the rash that I developed. They also saw Paul and ReBisar discussing the idea of letting me have this rash, or if they might take care of it. They let me have it, however, as it was something I had to go through, which was a living hell for months. Claudie asked Edgar Casey on the real side regarding the rash, and what he suggested helped a little. I had the experience also where the real me told the little me to go into the ocean, and despite Claudie and Sandy telling me not to, the ocean in fact helped. This is where we take the hits, and I went through the hellish, rash boot camp. These are things to make you stronger, and prepare you, etc. And you see all the different views. The guides take the hits also on occasion, if it makes sense to do so. But in your experience, the guide was just playing dead for the creature, playing that hit, taking it on. Then the creature becomes kind of funny. By the fact this guide took that sting, the creature was affected also. When these attacks occur, the guides many times will let them happen because they will use that. It's like a debt. It's like these creatures or ill-intended individuals are stealing money from you. Then there's a debt that's incurred, and the real guides will creatively use that debt without interfering with the free will, because the individual with their free will created that debt. So the guides get to use that debt in creative ways. That's a benefit that will actually help you. It's all about overall focus on the isness. ReBisar is the answer. The real guides are there. It's the real side, beyond the real side, etc. We have the earth here, this little surface world, and all these funny things going on. But in the meantime, the real risk-takers take the leap, and here we are. There's always more. Always ask yourself, what is it that I'm not seeing? It's not about what you see or know, but what you don't know, what you're not seeing. That's more real.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. Wonderful.
Yeah,
You're the great witness. You're the magic guy here. Thank you, Kevin.
agreement. Yeah, like agreement is a big deal. Like if one of the bodies, I see it as not in agreement and the other is, there's a conflict, could be physical, a disease or something, or some kind of emotional thing, you know, this thing about positive thinking. You may agree to it on one level, but not on another. So, you know, may not happen. So that agreement throughout all the bodies is important. Everything's lined up. So you're with the real awareness, and everybody's in tune with each other. Agreement is a big thing here in the creation. Okay, Tim, you have anything?
Oh, I was just thinking about the no coincidence stuff and how it relates to like the rash that Duane had. And
Duane says there's more rash to go around if you're interested. Yeah.
We can share the rest.
We can share the rash, he says. Okay.
yeah, it wouldn't be a coincidence, would it, to get it?
Right. Well, yeah, we go through these things, no matter where we are, who we are. This is creation. War zone. Yeah, let's see.
The wear zone.
The wear zone. Wears on you.
Yeah, it wears on you. Yes, sir.
I had some notes, but I can't read them. So anyway, do you have anything? Do you have any comments on your experience, Kevin? Maybe you see something more now by reading it.
No, not really. I mean, when I prepared it for this show, I added a lot more detail that I saw now that I didn't see back there anyway. So nothing further in addition to what I've already added to what was the original explanation and what I was aware of what it was representing from the time. So nothing further has occurred.
Okay, that's very good. Okay, in your experience with Yabul, was that in a real side experience or was that in the physical?
About Yabul or Gopalas?
The one with the hair.
Hair about is about Gopalas because I could see him maybe like seers when we start the sound of Ekankar, and I didn't use it very much, but at the first time I could see Gopal does like the picture painted by Eva, especially like this. And he encouraged me, Gopal does encourage me to or persuade me to pay attention to dancing because I was really sad and I didn't know why I'm in a sadness deeply. And I started and then continue it and then find the many obstacles and tap lines with Ekankar, and then finally Pal Twitchell and the ReBISAR-DUANEVA-PALL show me the NUUU wave is by one of the NUUU friend. But about Yowel Sakabi, I have experience with one of us seers that when I try to introduce NUUU to her, and one of her friends told her that you can use the HU sound to have experience the sound of Ekankar. When I heard this, I try to say that omit this sound because it sounds bothers you very much, and I singing NUUU by the calling with phone, and the phone calling interrupt, and I didn't know what happened to her. But after 1 hour, I tried to call her if she really good or not. She told me what was that song. I was in a mountain, Himalaya mountain. I could see the trees was dancing, and the special light come from each leaf of the trees, and then there was very happy and shiny, and then I find myself in a mountain, a Himalaya mountain, walking on this mountain, and then faced with one man with a nice face, with a smiling and shiny eyes, and special dress. When she described about this, I find that it was wasn't it this picture like this picture I showed the I sent the picture of Yowel, and she told that, yeah, how was it? What was the name? I told her Yowel Sakabi, and she told that this man told me with his eyes told me that this sound, the NUUU sound, and from this woman bring you here, and he by his eyes he telepathy told me that please say her to continue NUUU sound and send it for anyone. Yeah, and then she could see Laozi there, and maybe the Katsukari or Garihira temple in this mountain, and the bowling and bowling singing singing bowl, Tibetan bowl, and with next to Laozi. Yeah.
Again,
just
this is the physical or the dream? The real?
this is the experience with by hearing the voice of me. She could leave this world, and she could off her mind with judging, and then having a astral adventure or journey. She's really perfect with this journey without having any without needing any dream or sleep to face with this. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, sweetie.
Yeah, thank you. Duane says thank you. The roosters say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Great. Thank you as always. And thank you, Tim, for being here. So I'll do the NUUU here, and we can come back Wednesday for more. NUUU. Tim?
NUUU.
NUUU.
Kevin?
NUUU.